What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense. A couple of old friends who grew up together in Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. So this is our chance to get together once a week to talk about what's on our mind in the world of politics, sports, and entertainment. I'm Eric Messersmith in the Los Angeles area. That's Brian Johnson in suburban Washington, D.C. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well, man. This is going to be a very old man place to start because I was thinking about this today. It was so cold like 2 weeks ago, and now it is beautiful and sunny. And it made me think about how my father was obsessed with the weather. Like, did your parents just watch the weather constantly? Like for an unusual amount of time? Because
Right.
when you want to know the weather now, we just get out our phone and we know the weather. But back then, with like Weather Channel or your local guy that was in front of the green screen, like, did your family, did they like, were they obsessed with weather?
Not that much, but it definitely was the frequent topic of conversation in the neighborhood. And I think I was obsessed with the weather one time a year, and that was when it would snow. And I
Yeah.
was glued to the Weather Channel because I wanted to get off of school as much as possible.
Yeah, but when we
So,
were kids, it could snow 2 feet and they still had school.
right. So you never knew for sure, but I would sit there and watch it. But yeah, no, I know what you mean. As you get older, that's more and more becomes the topic of conversation is the weather.
It
It's such a cliche, but it is
It
so true.
is because dude, I've never cared about the weather, but like it was so nice yesterday. I had to find out, like, what is this forecast? What am I in for? Tell me about the patterns. And I immediately got nervous. I was like, is this going to be a thing now
Probably.
where like I'm glued into it? God, we're getting
You
old, dude.
you're of that age. Yeah. Well, hey, that's the go-to topic whenever you see the neighbor. That's like the thing I always go to if I don't have anything else to say. Beautiful day outside.
Oh, dude, in LA though, I mean, that has to be so boring. I mean, oh, it's 70 degrees again.
Right.
Like,
Well, the mornings are cold sometimes. Occasionally we'll get some rain. All right, Brian, we're 5 weeks in. This is week 6, I think, of the Trump administration. And there's new details. There's a lot going on, but a lot of the themes remain the same. Still a lot about DOGE cutting government spending. 21 employees who were part of DOGE resigned today.
well,
And
USDS, right? Would I mean, I get what you're
no,
saying,
no,
but
they were part of DOGE.
oh,
They weren't hired by Musk. So
right.
DOGE was there used to be, I forget the exact name now, the Office of Technology or something.
Hmm.
That became DOGE.
All right.
And so these people were already there and they were government employees prior to Trump taking over. They don't like what DOGE is doing. The letter to employees that came out over the weekend, did you see that?
I
Where
did.
that Musk wanted everyone by Monday night, we're recording this on Tuesday, by last night to submit 5 things they did last week. The memes online about that were hilarious. But several cabinet officials told people in their department not to submit it. And so it kind of became this whole back and forth, this whole thing. Now Musk says they're going to get another chance, but they have to submit it again.
Wow.
This just feeds into,
Yeah.
again, the point we made last week, and I think many people have made this point. We're not the only ones. Looking at the big picture of how many people are employed by the government, whether we can save some money, whether we can have some efficiencies, all of that totally fine. Doing it in this way, where you're firing people in mass for no reason other than they're probationary employees and they're easier to fire because they don't have the same kind of protection as other employees, and then rehiring some in the back and sending out emails basically saying justify your job and just this disruption.
As
Not only
Tom
is it
Womgant said, I'll sing for my supper.
right, not only is it not a good way to treat people, it's just so chaotic. And I thought the reaction to this "Tell me 5 things" email
So
really
for
just
those of us
summed
who
it up.
may not spend any time on X at all, because it is, um, as I've stated many times, it is basically the Porta John wall. Like when when you go into a Porta John and people write stuff on the wall,
Yes.
that's pretty much what X is to me. So for those of us who didn't see the 5 things memes, could you delight me with an example?
Oh, a lot of them were sexual.
Really?
Like, yeah, like these are the five
What a
things I did
surprise on the
last
internet.
week. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's X, so anything goes now. It's the Wild West. But they were funny, but they also kind of were just shaking their head almost. Like this is really what we're doing now. We're having people, this is the way we're going through. And again, go through, do a detailed inspection of what you're looking at. Take the time to figure it out. and then come back to us. DOGE, the problem I have with it's a mess. The New York Times reported today so they put up this website. I don't know if we talked about this last week. I don't know if it had been up yet, but they finally put up a website talking about and listing out the things they had cut. And they threw out the number 55 billion. But people looked at it and it was full of mistakes. And in one area, they said they did a grant that was, I think it was 8 billion. It actually was 8 million.
Wow.
That's a big mistake.
Whoa. That is a big one, man. That is the decimal point.
They were counting grants that were 5 years in, that were 4 years, let's say, of the 5 years, and they were canceling the grant and they were counting it as 5 years of savings, even though 4 years of the money had already been spent. The New York Times reported today there were 5 of their prominent money-saving things they put up that were taken down because I think they realized they weren't actually accurate. It's a mess. It's chaotic. And it's seeping in. You're seeing at these town halls now, Republican congressmen and women are getting yelled at by their constituents because of the chaos.
Judges are yelling at the DOJ.
Right. They're shutting. Yeah. Trump lost. The Trump administration's losing some court rulings as well. It's a chaotic start.
Well, I don't know if they lost that one, but the one I'm referring to was it was a female judge. I can't remember her name, but just yelling at the DOJ like, who is in charge? Like, who answers the who? Like, what is the structure? And like, they can't even answer the question. So it is really interesting. You were making me think though about how with Musk and a job and everything else, as someone who likes to cut a lot of corners at work, there are certain projects that I do that I know are going to be reviewed. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of work you can kind of like, you're tired. You got to wake up early. Maybe you don't give it 100% effort. But like, if you're DOGE, people are going to look at this with a fine tooth comb. And 8 million, dude, I didn't know 8 million and 8 billion. That is fantastic.
Yeah. It's just, now I will say they did get a win tonight as we're recording this. The Republican Party, they were able to pass a budget resolution in the House 217 to 215 by the skin of their teeth. Close. They have a very small majority. They had pulled the vote a few hours ago because it didn't look like they had the votes, but they did some arm twisting, Brian, some backroom some wheeling and dealing.
House of Cards. I love it.
So they have passed a budget resolution. This is the one big, beautiful bill Trump has talked about that has the money for his tax, the extension of the extension of the 2017 tax cuts, money for the border, big spending cuts. The thing is, though, it's very complicated and nerdy, but basically this was the easy part. This is non-binding. That does not have the force of law. It's basically just a blueprint of here are the general things we're going.
Concepts of a plan.
So this was the easy part, and it took a very heavy lift. Now they have to get the House and Senate aligned on the same budget. Then once they pass those, they actually have to craft the details. And the details
ChatGPT can do that.
Are going to be really complicated. Well, here's the problem. They want to cut $2 trillion of spending in this reconciliation bill. And as we just talked about with DOGE and the problems they're having, it turns out it's not as easy to cut government. Like, there's not just a line in the budget that says waste, fraud, and abuse, and you just delete that out and you're good to go. Like, it's really hard work, and you got to be diligent. You got to make tough choices.
Indulge me. How do we do less taxes and cut $2 trillion? I'm not a math whiz, but that's going to be tough.
Well, here's the thing they're talking about. So again, these are the preliminary reports,
right?
Preliminary goals without
sources say
they want to do 4.5 trillion in tax cuts, which, by the way, the Trump tax cuts of 2017 were so huge. 4.5 trillion isn't even enough to make them permanent. So that's going to cost 4.5 trillion, and they want to do 2 trillion in spending cuts to try to make up for some of that. Mm-hmm. But the net result is still going to be adding to the budget deficit.
Well, that's what I was driving at.
And Trump has talked about, we're going to balance the budget, but yet here we are with a $4.5 trillion tax cut extension, maybe more. A lot of Republicans want more because they want to do the no tax on tips that Trump promised, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. You add all these things together, and all of a sudden now you're talking about if you make them permanent. I saw an estimate the other day, it would be $8-9 trillion in lost revenue to the government. It's crazy when we have a $36 trillion budget deficit. And that's kind of the problem is we're seeing this with DOGE. Like it's easy to say I want to cut. And again, I'm totally for that. We do need to cut some
Yeah, but
spending.
those numbers are insane.
Right. But that's the problem is here is the fundamental divide. Whatever DOGE can come up with over the next 6 months and whatever Republicans do cut will most likely be a drop in the bucket compared to the massive revenue shortfall of the tax cuts they will pass, with a large benefit of that going to, not all of it, but a large amount of it going to the wealthiest among us. That's the fundamental disconnect.
But that's what, dude, I'm applying basic logic here, right? The one thing I do wonder, though, is does the deficit actually matter? Like, you've probably heard people talk about this before, because when we grew up, like, the deficit was a big deal. Wasn't there a thing in New York City where it just calculated the deficit?
Oh, the debt clock? Yeah, you can find that online.
Does that still exist? Well, they went online.
I don't know if it's a billboard anywhere anymore, but yeah, it just keeps spinning.
But this is kind of my point, right?
Trillion now.
Is so we used to be so concerned about our national debt that we went ahead and we had an electronic device do it in like our town central. Now they're like, you know what? Just put it online. People will find it there. And like, all kidding aside, I do wonder economically, relative to your GDP, how much does your deficit actually matter?
Well,
that's an interesting question.
It is a very interesting question. And the problem now is relative to GDP, I think we're back over 100% of GDP with our debt, our total debt. And that is a level, once you start getting there, is when it starts to get dangerous. And we haven't had these debt levels, I think, at that high a percentage since back during World War II, when obviously,
right.
That's a different story. When you're at war, everyone understands that. The thing is now, we're not at war. We don't have a pandemic anymore. We don't have a housing crisis anymore. The economy is pretty good. We're 4% unemployment. And we still keep racking up $1 trillion or $2 trillion every year in deficit, adding on to the debt, which is $36 trillion. And it gets to a point, I think it's 18% right now, roughly, of every dollar we spend is simply paying interest on the debt. We pay more interest on the debt than we pay for national defense, and we pay a lot of money for national defense. It gets to a point where it is a long-term problem for our country. Eventually, we're going to have to do something pretty drastic to fix it, either on the spending side or the tax side or both, if we don't do it now. And I think that is the issue Republicans are running into, is they're going to have to do one of two things. They're either going to have to make substantial cuts, not waste, fraud, and abuse, but actually cutting programs that help people, particularly Medicaid. Medicaid is the one that a lot of people are talking about. And there's a lot of pushback already because many Republicans have lots of people in their districts on Medicaid, because Medicaid, it's a massive number of people.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's almost a third, I think, of people are on Medicaid.
And that's only going to grow.
So it's a huge number of people all over the country. Or they won't touch that, barely. And then they probably, because Trump has already said he doesn't want to touch Social Security, doesn't want to touch Medicare. So now the number of dollars you can get from cuts is pretty small. And if that's the case, and you don't touch Medicaid, so now you're in a situation where you have these massive tax cuts you're going to push through. You're not going to cut much spending, and you're going to blow a massive hole even more in the deficit and debt. There was some other breaking news today. On Tuesday, as we're recording this, apparently Ukraine has agreed to the mineral deal with the U.S., where the U.S. and Ukraine will have some type of joint partnership. The details aren't really out now, but this is breaking. This is breaking. So there was a report of this a few weeks back where apparently we handed a piece of paper to Zelensky and said, sign this. And I'm not making this up. And it was like, give us 50% of your rare earth minerals forever, or until you hit like whatever the price is that the U.S. gave you in aid, which was aid, by the way. It wasn't a loan. And Zelensky was like, wait a minute. That was aid, not a loan. Like, let's talk about this. So apparently Zelensky has gotten what he wants. He's coming to Washington to sign this deal, apparently. I actually think this is a good thing. Like, I don't mind if we, have a joint partnership for the minerals with Ukraine. If it gets us more invested in preserving the sovereignty of that country, that is the important thing. And that's going to be the game over the next weeks and months as we begin these negotiations with Russia.
Trump, and when I say we, mostly you, but I occasionally give Trump a lot of grief on this program.
No.
And I will say that I actually really like this. Getting something in return. Like you're right, like it was aid that was given, but it's basically saying like, hey man, if we help you out here, like we got to get something back. Like this isn't just, for the goodwill of doing something. I mean, that seems to me, forgive me, to be shrewd politics.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it doesn't as long as it's not a shakedown and it's truly a partnership, which I think it really is, because I think the reports are Zelensky got them to change some
You're
things.
accusing Trump of a grift. How dare you?
Well, I know, right? I'm totally fine with it. We have to make sure, though, that it's not a precursor to selling out Ukraine. And I don't know if you saw Emmanuel Macron was here yesterday with Trump.
Macron.
And Macron and the Europeans are panicking because they think that the U.S. is about to sell Ukraine down the river to Russia. And there's some evidence that that may be true. We'll see. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. It was the 3-year anniversary of the war. The United Nations passed a resolution that said that Russia was the aggressor in the war. Britain, France, 93 countries voted to condemn Russia. One of the countries who voted against it, Russia, of course, North Korea, Belarus, and the United States of America.
You know what? That's not a group you want to be in, man.
Even China and Iran abstained. China and Iran abstained from this vote, and we were on the side of. If you're ever on the side of North Korea on any vote, you've made the wrong vote.
Well, this is what I'm saying. This is like getting assigned seating in school, and you look around, and like one kid's got his finger in his nose, and the other one is like just laying on the desk, slobbering on himself, and you're there. Like that's who we just got grouped with. That's not good, man.
Well, and Trump was asked about it in the Oval Office, and he said, I'm not going to get into it, but I think it's self-evident. I think he said why he did it. And like the people who love Trump will say, well, he's doing this clearly to curry favor with Putin. Right. Which, okay, sure. I agree that's why he's doing it, why he doesn't call Putin a dictator, but does call Zelensky a dictator. But first of all, there's a moral price to pay for that, because voting that way, you look really bad. You are siding against your allies and with your enemies. So there is a credibility price there. There is I would say, a kind of moral reputational price. But here's the other thing. Putin's not Trump. He doesn't care if he's flattered. What Putin cares about is getting the deal he wants. Trump, when he was with Macron, Trump said the other day, well, Putin has told me that he will agree to European peacekeepers to after there's a ceasefire in Ukraine. Well, the Kremlin came out the other day and said, no, we don't agree to that. We don't want that. That's not going to happen. They want the deal that gives them basically everything. And they don't care how nice Trump is to Putin. And I think that is where Trump miscalculates, is it's not going to matter. The only way Russia's going to give Ukraine a fair deal is if the pressure on Putin is so intense that he feels like he has to. And look, I hope I'm wrong. We said this last week. If Trump ends up with a really good deal, I'll be the first one to say, great job. You're the art of the deal guy. Congratulations. But I just have seen nothing that makes me think that Trump is willing to put the hammer down on Putin in a way that you would need to get the kind of pressure on him you would need to get a deal. I think Trump wants a deal a hell of a lot better than he wants a good deal. And I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't know how you could watch
there was
what he's done and draw another conclusion
of economic pressure on Russia initially. But as it would turn out, there's a heavy reliance from Europe on Russia. And that, of course, happened after the fall of the Soviet Union. And I'm talking specifically about their need for natural gas and, energy. So the Russian economy did not collapse despite all of the sanctions and despite everything we did. Obviously, it's not, 2006 anymore. But I don't know. What would the expectation be? I guess I'm asking you, like, what other sanctions can we put on Russia? How more could we harm them economically?
I need you got to move a little bit over. Your
Oh,
beautiful
I'm not
face
going to
is out
kick.
of the frame.
I'm not going to
Brian,
kick the computer again. I got to be
give the
careful.
people what they want.
Here, what do
Show
you
them that
asking,
glorious
right? Like you
beard.
agree, we've already tried a lot of
Well,
sanctions on Russia, and they've really withstood it. They had a heck of a
well,
war
they did. So if
built
you
up.
look at it, you the first up until recently, they did a good job of limiting the bite of the sanctions by
Yeah,
spending a shitload of money on their military, social welfare programs, bringing in China
China.
to
Yep.
replace the U.S. investment. But it's catching up to them. Like their economy has been slowing down dramatically. Their inflation rate is rising. Like it's starting to bite now,
Mhm.
and that's the point. That is why the pressure has to stay on them,
Yeah.
and you really have to make them hurt. That's the only way you're going to get Putin to come to any kind of deal that preserves Ukraine. Because as like Macron said the other day, like our predecessors, meaning he and Trump, the people before him and he and Trump in their positions, negotiated a deal when Putin invaded Crimea. And it didn't hold. And the reason it didn't hold is because it didn't have any real
Yeah.
backing. It didn't have any teeth. A deal for a deal's sake is not a win, it's a loss. The thing I do like, so as you said, we're hard on our dear president, our dear leader sometimes. But I will say the one nice thing I do like about Trump is he throws out some weird things that that actually some of them are good ideas and maybe could shift the paradigm. Like he said the other day, a couple of weeks ago, he said, I would like to sit down with China and Russia and negotiate a huge decrease in our nuclear stockpile and military budgets. And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's ever going to happen because
Right.
I don't think they would ever agree to that. But I like the fact that you even throw something like that out there. That's an idea that wouldn't that be great, right? If we could do that. So this is an interesting idea Trump came up with today. An immigration gold card that will be sold to immigrants for $5 million. It's a premium version of a green card, will provide immigrants with a pathway to citizenship. He said, "This is a gold card. We're going to put a price tag on it of about $5 billion, and you'll get the green card privileges plus
No,
wealthy
five
people will be
million.
coming. 5 million wealthy people will be coming in our country by buying this card. They'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people. We kind of do this with like the H-1B visa for it's not for necessarily for rich people. It's for people who are highly skilled in certain
Yeah.
areas. And so we let
Scientists.
them in. We give them a kind of a bump up to the in the immigration system. I think we do need to completely overhaul our immigration system. I've talked about this before. Our birth rate is very low and getting lower. We need more workers of all skill levels. And so this is one of the areas where I diverge with Trump is he's very hard not just on illegal immigration, but he really doesn't want legal immigration. He doesn't want refugees. He doesn't want asylum. I think America, if we do it right and vet it right, I think we should continue those programs. But I do agree with him that there is something to be said for getting the best talent and making it. We do not want to make it difficult for people who are incredibly successful. And that doesn't always equal wealth, but it often does. We
Yeah.
want the very successful, very intelligent, very top end people coming to America if they want to. We want to make it easy for them to do that. And so anything we can do to help that, even if it's letting them literally buy their way in, I'm actually okay with.
That's interesting. I think not to just poke holes in it immediately, but also to just poke holes in it immediately. Are the thing is, if you have $5 million and you are in some of these other countries, you have really no reason to leave, because $5 million, while that might not be all the money in the world here, and I say that knowing that most people, since we are $1.2 trillion in credit card debt of the country, I know not everyone has $5 million at their disposal. So I am just saying, though, $5 million is actually not a ton of money in the US. And there are a lot of countries in the world where $5 million you can live pretty much for the rest of your life. I actually, just anecdotally, I had a friend of mine who unfortunately his father died when he was very young, around 25 years old, and he had a chain of um, elder care facilities in Florida, and the kid sold them right away for, as you would imagine, a handsome sum. He's lived in Thailand for the last 25 years and has never had a real job, because you can live in Thailand forever on $5 million. So, look, if you're in Singapore, Thailand, a lot of Asian countries, obviously, if you're in most of the African nations, almost all of them, $5 million US, that is a tremendous, life changing, almost generational wealth. I don't see the incentive for why you would spend that money to get a U.S. citizenship. It seems like a strange investment. Like, I just feel like it's something not a lot of people would buy.
Oh, you might be right. I don't know. I think there's a lot of wealthy people that come to the United States and spend a lot of time here and own homes here. And I'm sure they would love to have citizenship and would probably give you the 5 million. So
Well,
I think
tax benefits would be the biggest one. Because
right.
that's the thing. If you're a citizen in Great Britain and you spend a lot of time in the U.S., you pay taxes in the U.S. because that's where you earn your income, and you pay taxes back to Great Britain. So if you could just say like, "Hey, I pay $5 million for my U.S. citizenship," I mean, maybe Daniel Craig is like, "Shit, I'll have $100 million extra dollars. I'll buy that."
We have to get the most skilled people. And it's like it's like the NBA, right? The NBA is great because the best people from all over the world come there. The people who are free agents in the realm of, especially if they're in the tech industry and anything to do with AI, we need them here in America. And anything we can do to incentivize that, I think is something that we should consider. All right, Brian, I wanted to talk about one more thing with Trump. I saw this the other day. Actually, this just happened today. So for a long time, there's been a thing called the White House Correspondents Association. It still exists. They put on that dinner every year where there's always a meeting that Trump
almost always
attend. Yeah, I don't think he'll be attending this year, but they'll still have the dinner. And so they're in charge of running the media side. So they determine, for instance, how the what they call the pool covers the president, and that is when the president's traveling, basically. Because obviously on the plane, on foreign travel, you can't take every reporter that's at the White House and put them on Air Force One. So they come up with a system where a certain number from outlets go with the president. And so then when the president talks to them on the Air Force One, those are the reporters he's talking to. Well, the White House is announcing that they're now going to handpick the reporters on these pool trips, ending decades of precedent. And this is the main media outlet. So the pool is made up of like Fox News, CNN, ABC, NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the AP, which is why they're doing this, because we talked about this a little bit last week. The Associated Press, in their official style guide, is saying that you can call it the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico. And Trump, of course, said no, it's officially renamed as the Gulf of America. And so they are not allowing now the AP to go into the Oval Office, to fly on Air Force One. And now they're taking over and handpicking which reporters will go on the White House board.
See, this is the stuff I really don't like.
This is so petty.
It's not just that.
And it's a violation of the First Amendment. I mean, the idea that a news organization, I will say this, even Newsmax, which is a very, very far-right conservative outlet, filed a motion in support of the AP.
Of course.
And they did it because they said, look, we may not agree with everything the AP does, but a future administration may not agree with
everything we do, right?
Exclude us. And that's the point. It's a chilling effect on speech.
Yeah, I think I have already said my piece, which is like, these are the kind of things that I have the most issue with our president. Like, just, I get it. I don't even care about Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico. Who cares? Like, in the big scheme of things, is this having like a huge impact in the world? I don't think so. But, oh man, this is the stuff that has the tinge of the F word. Fascism.
It does.
Suppressing the media and the press. Like, look, I don't know how much people are into this, but if you opened up Fascism 101, this would be in the first couple pages.
Well, and the AP
if you control the media,
right,
you control the message.
And the AP has sued, and they lost a temporary injunction, but the merits of the case will be decided. And based on precedent, I think they've got a pretty good case when it comes to the First Amendment. And I think they may ultimately end up prevailing in court. We'll see. But look, there definitely is the chilling effect. We talked about this before. CBS, it looks like the reports are they're going to settle a lawsuit where Trump sued 60 Minutes for their interview with Kamala Harris for editing it. And if you watch the edit, it was basically the normal editing that a
Yeah.
program like 60 Minutes does all the time. The lawsuit is completely meritless, but CBS is owned by Paramount, and Paramount wants to merge with, I think it's called Skydance. And in
Yeah.
order to merge, they're going to need the approval of the Donald Trump administration.
Yes.
So Sherry Redstone, who owns Paramount and is set to make billions of dollars in this merger, is likely going to settle this lawsuit with Donald Trump and write him a check, even though the lawsuit.
Well, look, I get it from a business perspective.
I do too, but but it has a chilling effect on the media and on 60 Minutes. And for her personal financial outlook, of course, that's why she wants to do it. But I mean, it also throws the news before under the bus.
Yes.
Also, we know Jeff Bezos killed prior to the election, right before, killed the editorial that was ready to go, that was an endorsement of Kamala Harris. There, you saw Mark Zuckerberg completely do a 180 on content moderation. And by the way, I agree with a lot of what Zuckerberg did, but you also have to admit that there's a pretty clear reason why.
Well, these people aren't fools.
Right.
I mean, listen, I know a lot of rich people who are stupid. Like, I'm saying, like, dumb as shit. You know, maybe they just got lucky. Maybe they got some family money. Who knows, whatever that is. But when you reach the level of the kind of people that we are talking about right now, you don't get there by being a moron. Like, these are calculated moves. They understand the lay of the land. They know how to read a room.
Right.
Like, so I know it's really hard. And to be clear, this is not a hill I would die on, but it's hard to be on the side of billionaires. Like, no one likes that. But can't we just, like, everyone settle down for a second and just be like, look, it makes practical sense, right? Like, if you're in that position, wouldn't you think maybe strategically some of these things are, from a business perspective, a good idea?
Well, it depends on what you value. I mean, yes, but then by that
they value money.
Well, right, but by that rationale, then every owner of every media organization would automatically completely kiss the ass of any incumbent administration. And like, would we want the New York Times and every media outlet to all of a sudden switch their editorial view based on?
Yeah, but it's not about that.
Like,
that's the problem with capitalism is the New York Times has its audience. They know who they are. So they wouldn't do it based on... See, that's the mistake in this conversation you're making. I get what you're saying, and I love that you used the New York Times as an example, because no, of course the New York Times is going to take the moral high road and say they're doing this, that, and the other, because it serves their purpose. They are not selling the New York Times to the same people that are, you know, watching Newsmax and Tucker Carlson interviews. That's not who they're going towards. A completely different audience. So yes, you can take the moral position, but also it serves the purpose for their bottom line.
Well, that's probably true. Especially if they don't have any pending business before the government. I do think there comes a point, though, where journalism, if you choose to own a journalistic outlet and you choose to run it, because a lot of these big companies, they don't have to do it. They could sell their news divisions. If you want to have the news division, if you're Jeff Bezos and you want to own the Washington Post and you want to put the slogan, democracy dies in darkness, I think you do have an obligation other than making money. I really do. I feel very strongly about that, because journalism, this is not like on a soapbox. They call it the fourth branch of government for a reason. It is literally fundamental to our democracy. It's not the same thing as a bakery or a big media conglomerate, an amusement park, whatever, a movie studio. It's different. Journalism in our country has a sacred place for a reason. Now, obviously, we understand capitalism and we understand the corporate ownership of media, and we all get it that media outlets have a point of view, right? And that's fine. That's existed throughout American history. But a point of view, whether it be liberal, conservative, of your media outlet, is different than, okay, now this person won, and I'm going to start changing my editorial outlook to appease that person. I don't think most media outlets are doing that, by the way. I want to be clear on that. But I think that's in play in a way that I don't think it's been in play as much in our lifetime.
Well,
and I think that gets back to what you were saying earlier.
To your point, during the days of William Randolph Hearst, who ran basically all major newspapers in the United States in like the early 1900s. That's just a shift in power. Because I could make a strong argument that William Randolph Hearst was the most powerful person in the United States during that time period, not any singular politician or person in business. But I just think there's been a giant shift in that way where now it's really the politicians are holding the cards and the media is kind of at the mercy of these folks. It's really interesting to me anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely a story to watch. All right, Brian, let's turn to the world of sports. Unfortunately, as you and I are recording this, the Lakers are playing the Mavericks in Dallas, the return of Luka Doncic, which is an interesting story in and of itself. The game and how the reception of the fans and how mad they are at the ownership and how dumb that trade already looks, especially with AD getting hurt right away for Dallas and being out several weeks. But the thing that interests me as kind of a Laker fan living out here in LA and being a Laker fan even when I was younger.
Right. Because you like Duke, the Yankees. You like the Cowboys. You didn't like the Cowboys.
No,
like the Steelers.
I did not like the Yankees. I did like the Lakers and Duke. But I was a Magic Johnson fan back in the 80s. I'm kidding.
I'm teasing you.
Also, we had no, in Central PA, we had no real NBA team anywhere near us.
God, no.
I think I was watching the Lakers the other day because I thought, okay, it's great they get Luka. I thought long-term home run for the franchise. You have to make that trade. But I thought in the short term, given his defensive problems, given the fact LeBron's 40, given the fact they lose AD and have no big man really to speak of, they're going to really struggle defensively. And they're probably still not a title contender. I'm here to say they are a title contender. I watched them the other day in Denver work the Nuggets.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a fluke. Over the last 15 games, the Lakers have the number one defense in the NBA net rating, defensive rating. Now, a large chunk of that was with AD, but not all of it. They haven't had AD for the last 5-6 games. And they did this against Jokic, who I think only had 7 shot attempts. They defended him brilliantly with Jackson Hayes, and then a lot of times with no true center on the floor, double teaming him, triple teaming him, flying around the perimeter. LeBron looks energized at 40. And then on the offensive end, now that Luka's got a little bit of a flow, they are so dangerous. I was not optimistic even after the trade that the Lakers would be able to get it together this quick. But I'm telling you, man, they are a threat to win this thing. They could win the championship this year.
Well, Luka basically carried the Mavericks to the title last year. I mean, and he's been injured this year. But look, I don't want to beat this to death, man. He's one of the most dynamic. There's a strong argument that Luka is one of the top 5 greatest offensive players of all time. And that's not just like subjective. That's based on the data, the numbers he's putting up. The one thing that you said that is incredible, though, is how is LeBron James somehow one of the most talked about people in all of NBA history, but in my opinion, one of the most underappreciated superstars we've ever had. It's so weird, dude. Like, is it just like the era that we live in of like social media where like no one can agree on anything and we're like, oh, right. Because can we just all admit that a 40-year-old man playing at the highest level of basketball that can be played, putting up 25, 8, and 8 consistently is incredible. Like, it's insane. Like, it's insane.
He's had the, like, I get tired of the player debate. He's the best player we've ever seen, but he certainly has had the greatest career we've ever seen. There's no question about that. Literally nobody has done what he's done at this age. He is unbelievable.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not making a sports argument radio about this. I'm just saying, like, I know we don't agree on anything in America anymore, but 25, 8, and 8 at 40 years old is incredible. Like, it's insane.
Nobody does that. Nobody ever does that at that age. And here he is. And if you watch him, he's not quite what he was in his prime, but he's so freaking close. It's scary. It's like, how is this even possible?
It is.
He is doing this. he's shooting efficiently. He earlier this year he had his highest 3-point percentage in his career. I think it's fallen back a little bit now, but he's still shooting threes really, really well. He's gotten so much better at that. His passing and even his defense, it's not quite the same as what it was, but like I said, when he wants to and he gets locked in, he can still fly around the floor defensively too. And it's amazing at that age. They're a real they're a real threat. And I'll say this, so is Golden State. Jimmy Butler has rejuvenated that team. I watched them the other day. They look fantastic.
Wow.
And Jonathan Kuminga is coming back soon, who's a young player who's a 20-point a night guy. They're up to Golden State is a legitimate title contender too, and I never would have thought that a few months ago. They
got Jimmy Butler.
Good.
They got Jimmy buckets, playoff Jimmy. I mean, like, I don't know how people can't understand this stuff. It's not hard. I was just thinking, though, I don't really get into the WWE style drama or the soap opera drama, if you want to call it that, in sports. And I realize that there are different personalities and people are attracted to and like different personalities, and that's part of fandom. But it's just, if you could just observe the games and the sport and the way it's played, I don't know how you can watch LeBron James and not just be blown away. I don't understand it. But anyway, I'll let it go, man. Like I said, I don't do a lot of sports talk radio drama. Like, I don't want to get into a debate if he's the greatest ever or not. I'm just saying, certainly over the last 20 years and definitively at the age of 40,
right.
I mean, come on. I don't know. Like, Golden State's going to be interesting. I think both of them long term may get bitten by the same bug in the playoffs, and that's why I did kind of like AD going to Dallas. As I think sometimes having the dominant big. I know this isn't the era of like Ewing and Robinson and Olajuwon and Shaq anymore, but when you have someone that's like Jokic, someone that's like AD, those. Like Embiid, if God forbid he could ever be healthy for any extended period of time, like they're just such a difference maker.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the other big story, sports-wise, I don't know, Wemby being out for the season is a major bummer.
It's crushing.
That sucks, man. If you're a fan,
would have won,
that
would have won the Defensive Player of the Year for sure. In fact,
I think he still should.
Well, he can't. He's
not going to be qualified.
You have to do 65 games now, and he's not going to make it. And in the past, he probably would have won it if that rule wouldn't apply, because he's averaging almost 4 blocks a game, which is absurd.
Right.
It's crazy to think that this kid is so good that he's the best defensive player in the league in his second year. And he probably would have been second or third team All NBA in his second year. He was averaging like 24, 11, 5, and 4 blocks in his second season at 20 years old. I mean, that is insane.
I just hope he's okay, man.
I do too, because I read this the other day that apparently this is similar to what Chris Bosh had that ended Bosch's career. The thrombosis in the shoulder. Apparently, when you're very tall and you fly, those are the things that aggravate.
Yeah.
Right. Is if you're very, very tall, which he is, and you fly a lot, which clearly in the NBA.
Well, they better get this man a John Madden bus.
Right, get him a bus.
Do what we got to do, man.
Because I'll tell you that if the NBA, part of the issue they're having, I think, is the stars sit out a lot of games. And I understand why that is. Like, I'm not here to tell anybody to play when they're not physically ready to play. And I'm not here to tell a team to push a guy to play that they've invested millions and millions of dollars in.
Well, hundreds of millions in some cases.
Hundreds of millions. Right. But I will say this. With a lot of these stars in the NBA are getting older. We mentioned a few, LeBron, Curry, there are others, to KD. Wemby is one of the faces of this league for the next 15 years. He may do things we've never seen done before. And man, if he has any kind of issue that makes him miss significant time over the prime of his career, that would be really devastating for the NBA. And he's the next guy. All right, Brian, you got any reviews this week? What have you been watching?
Let's see. I did finish off, because we talked about it, White Lotus. I'm not to the 3rd season yet. I started the 2nd season.
You watched season 1 and a little bit of season 2.
I watched season 1 and the first episode of season 2, and it's coming around. I'm coming around on it, so I will give you that. But no really new reviews. Mostly just checking the weather and World War II documentaries.
I have watched the first couple episodes of season 3. And I will say, we mentioned Thailand earlier. Definitely love the location and how Mike White uses it in this show. I thought the first episode was okay of season 3. And then I was watching episode 2, and you had told me that you struggled to get through the first season because you thought it was a little too slow.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the first part of episode 2, and I'm thinking, I'm kind of feeling that right now. But
Not
I will
slow. I hated everyone.
You hate it.
And it was slow. But go ahead, sorry to interrupt.
I will say they really pushed it forward, I thought, at the end of episode 2. I don't want to give any spoilers away.
Spoiler alert.
But I'm anxious for you to catch up because I really like the way that the drama is going and the way that season 2 is building. And there's just something about the locations. Maybe it's just because I'm a sucker for a great resort. And so these kind of shows are like right in my wheelhouse. If you can give me a great resort in a beautiful location, I'm in. I don't really even need much of a story. And White Lotus is a great story, but I don't even know if I need that.
Listen, I feel very lucky to have the ability to travel. And I saw the first episode of season 2, and I immediately wanted to know exactly where that was. Because and it was Sicily. Dude, I've never been to Sicily. I've been to Italy. Never to Sicily, though. I want to go there now because of that show.
Right. Absolutely. And that's how I feel like I am like in love with Thailand now. I had never in my life even thought about
I've talked to you about Thailand. Dude, I never recommended you go to Thailand. I'm sure
I don't know. Yeah, you've spent time there, right?
Yeah. I spent about a month there when I was younger. Just my very quick Thailand stories. And now bear in mind, this is like the late 90s. So it's a different time to be alive. But I had a driver who just drove me around and who was like my guide and told me places to like not go. I paid him $100 for the month.
Oh, wow. And he probably loved that. That was probably a great wage.
The average income in Thailand at the time was $250 a year. I'm sure it's changed, but you could go to a bar and get a beer for 10 cents. Like, it was no joke. But the biggest part was just because you were white, and it wasn't just about being white. If you were very noticeably an American, like, dude, you could do anything.
You were treated well.
Oh my God. It was like Squid Game. Like, it's unbelievable.
What do you mean it was like Squid Game?
It's just like the separation of like the players and then the people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, not that you're going to harm anyone or do anything. It's just you stand out so much. But now there's a huge expatriate population in Thailand.
Yeah.
Because of this, because it's so inexpensive and a place to live. But the resorts, dude, the food is amazing. Clothes are cheap. Take your wife, man. Don't pack anything. Just go take an empty suitcase and come back. She'll have a whole new wardrobe for probably 10% of what you would spend on Rodeo Drive.
It's funny you say that because in episode 1, they make reference to all the bald guys in Thailand, and they say the locals call them the LBH, losers back home, and they come to Thailand because they're. No, I'm not saying you in your prime.
I had all of my hair.
You had your hair.
I was 22 years old. I had abdominal muscles.
You had no gray at that point.
No, wow. I might have had a gray or two, but
a thick dark mane back then.
Thick dark mane.
So we have now you and I, between now and the next time we meet, Brian, it will be the Academy Awards. Oscars,
I heard tell of them.
Our Sunday night. I'll tell you, when I was younger, for most of my life, actually, I have loved the Oscars. I've tried to see as many of the movies as I could. And I don't know exactly why. I have some theories, but over the last few years, I've started to lose that. And I think part of it is just getting older, but I think part of it is, and you and I have talked about this before, when we were growing up, most of our lives, movies were the pinnacle of visual entertainment. That is where the best actors, directors, writers, cinematographers, the biggest budgets, that was the cream of the crop. And that has changed in the prestige TV era to the point where it started out kind of slow and gradual, but I would say now TV has usurped movies.
Not even close.
As the place for elite level talent.
Thank you, Sopranos.
Quality. Yeah, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad. It didn't happen overnight, but like movie stars used to not be on TV unless they did a guest spot. Now they are the stars of these
Kevin
shows.
Costner,
Yeah,
Yellowstone.
there's so many examples, and I'm telling you, I just think television has long ago, and I think that is a big reason why I'm not as into films as I used to be.
Can I quickly go through the list of Best
Please,
Picture nominees?
please.
Amelia Perez, never seen it. A Complete Unknown. I know, isn't a Complete Unknown? Isn't that the one about
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan?
It's
Is
a
that
Bob Dylan
Chalamet?
biopic.
Is that
Yep,
Timothy Chalamet?
it is. He just
Uh,
won the SAG award for Best Actor for that the other day.
gotcha. I mean, I love Bob Dylan. Conclave.
That
Seen
is,
it?
I have no. I've the only Best Picture nominee I've seen is Dune 2.
Oh,
Conclave
I
is
was gonna
about
say
a
Conclave.
fictional.
It's got to be about the Vatican.
It's a fictional account of them of the Cardinals coming together to pick a
Yeah,
pope.
of course it
Which,
is.
if
It
you've been
sounded
watching the news,
religious.
if you've been watching the news lately,
He's not in good shape.
our boys in bad shape. So we may be having a real life conclave here pretty soon, unfortunately.
So here's my major point. I've only seen one of these films, and it was Dune Part Two, and it was not great.
I saw Wicked on Broadway, but I have not seen the
With
film.
Ariana Grande.
Yeah, I'm not. No, she wasn't on the
Oh,
Broadway one, but I have not
I
seen the
would pay
film.
a handsome fee, and I
I've
know
seen
my
it on
wife would as
Broadway.
well to see Ariana Grande.
So yeah, I am going to go though. So my wife and I have a date, and she said you can pick the date on Saturday, and I said, you know what I want to do? Something I don't really ever do anymore, which is I want to go to the movies. I used to go to the movies all the time. I probably go to the movies 30 times a year. Now I don't even remember the last movie I saw in the theater. So I said we are going to the movies, and we are going to see an Oscar contender.
Mhm.
And I think I'm going to go see Nora, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, has the best betting odds right now to win Best Picture. So I want to at least see one of these movies besides Dune 2 before the Academy Awards Sunday
Okay,
night.
hold on. I want to see what Honora is about just very quickly. It's a comedy drama about a sex worker and the son of a Russian oligarch. This sounds fun.
Yes,
I hope it's
yes,
good.
it
I hope
does.
you enjoy it.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying to get back into watching movies and movies that are nominated for Academy Awards because I don't know, there is something magical about the movies. I still like to watch old movies sometimes. I want to get that back, but it's just harder because of I think what we've seen with the home experience getting so good and all the money now going to TV and all these streaming
Yeah.
services.
Well, I think I'm going to say the most obvious thing in the world, but like the incentive to make great films anymore, it's just not there. And like everything in life, it comes down to incentive. Like, so if you run a studio or a film house or whatever you run, you want to make as much money as you possibly can. So, I'm sure Honora might look. The fact that they're still making cool films that don't make a ton of money, I think that's great. But so that's why we have 10 Best Picture nominees now, though. So some of these really good films can make some money because
Yeah,
otherwise, if they weren't nominated for Best Picture, I don't think they would.
absolutely. All right, Brian, any final thoughts today before we exit?
Sorry, I couldn't stay in the picture. I'm so tired, man. I
It was like
really am.
I was getting half your face for a while.
Well, if you hadn't told me to sit up in my chair, I think I may have just laid down at one point, like just on the floor, and been done with it. So my final thought for the evening is no, just what I said, dude. Enjoy the movies. Good to see you, and we'll do it again.
All right, give some rest. We'll talk again next week. For Brian Johnson, I'm Eric Messersmith. Thanks for being with us. We hope you enjoyed the show, but if not, please take no offense.